Hello beautiful people, and how's everybody doing? I'm back at Elisa Beach and I figured why don't I make a video on the Nikon D850's multiple exposure function. Now the D810 had multiple exposure, but the D850 is taking it to the next level, so let's check it out. So in your photo shooting menu, if you go all the way down just about, you see multiple exposure. Keep in mind that you cannot turn this on, or if you turn it on, it'll turn off if you enter live view mode. So this cannot be done in live mode. So once you have this turned on, you can choose the number of shots, which the maximum is 10. Same thing on the D810, you could do a maximum of 10 shots. But what the D850 is adding on top of what the D810 offered is that now you have overlay mode. On default, it's set to average, but you can also use add, lighten, and darken. So we will check all of these out and see how the effect turns out. So for those who are not familiar what this particular multiple exposure function does, it essentially allows you to take multiple shots and then merge them into one. So you could actually get a very nice long exposure shot of the waves, for example, without needing an ND filter. On top of that, you can also keep all the exposures that you will shoot and use to merge into one final image. So I'm going to wait until the sun sets just a little bit more, so the sun isn't too harsh, the lighting isn't too harsh, and then we will go ahead and use all of these different modes and see what we can come up with. Okay, so I went ahead and I composed my shots. So this is going to be our composition. I have vibration reduction turned off, which you want to turn off when you're on tripods. We're at about 20 millimeters. And let's go ahead and check out the settings. We got a shutter speed of 3 seconds, and I cranked up the F number to 22, the highest. And I also lowered the ISO to the lowest that I could choose. Let's see, 4 seconds will actually work. So what you can do, once you have your multiple exposure set up, so you will go ahead and turn it on. So we got 10 shots and we'll start with the average mode. So once you have all of that set up, you can go into timer shooting modes. So that way, once you press the button right here, there's not going to be any camera shake, and then it'll start shooting the entire sequence one after the other. So now it's the second picture, third picture, and so forth. So once again, if that was too quickly explained and confusing, I like to use the timer shooting modes because as you touch the camera's shutter button, there's going to be a little bit of camera shake. You can prevent that by using this, and you can also, in your custom settings, you can change how many seconds it'll take for this particular timer mode to start shooting. And I think I got mine set at 3 seconds or so, the lowest number. So there you go, it's going to take all the shots and it should be done in just a moment. And then now it says busy, now it's merging all the pictures. So let's check out what I have on my memory card now. So I got the 11th shot, which is the final merge shot, and I got the 10 individual shots. Okay, now that was, once again, the average overlay mode. Let's go ahead and try all the other ones out as well, and we'll check them out on the big computer screen. Okay, so here we are in Lightroom, and my goal is to explain to you what each of these overlay modes do. And once you have an understanding, you can go ahead and see what kind of creative images you can come up with. So number 1 through 10 were the shots for the average overlay mode. So our 11th is the merged average overlay mode shot. And then 12 through 21 are for add. So I'm gonna set some star ratings here so we can actually filter these out in a moment. And then 23 through 32 were for lighten. So 33 is our lightened overlay shot. And then the rest through 43 are for darken. And then 44 is the merged shot. Now keep in mind that all of the shots, like 1 through 10, 12 through 21 and so forth, all of the shots that were taken to be merged for the particular overlay mode, they all have the same settings: 4 seconds shutter speed, 22 f-stop, and so forth. So the only thing that really is different is just the way the waves were approaching. So let's explain and break down what each of these overlay modes do, and then we'll look at what happened in our particular case. Okay, so let's begin with average overlay mode. In this case, we have 10 pictures. Once again, they all have the same settings, and none of these are edited, by the way. These are all the raw shots, and this is our final shot. As you can see, it looks pretty cool. It looks as if we had used an ND filter and had a very, very long shutter speed. But as you can see, it just says 4 seconds, and it takes in consideration what the shutter speed was for the 10 shots. Now, what does average overlay mode do? Average overlay is probably what the D810 uses too, at least that's what I would think. It basically considers the number of pictures that you took, in this case 10, and then before it stacks it and merges it into your final shot, it'll divide the gain of all of the pictures by the number of pictures. So the exposure that turns out will be average. So there's nothing going to be funky, and this is probably your safest way to go. Now, let's say you had 4 pictures. In that case, the 4 pictures, all of their gains would be divided by 4, and then you would end up with an average. So that's your safest way to go, and probably the easiest to understand and the easiest to use. Now let's move on to the next. What happens in add overlay mode, and as you can see, once again, we have the same settings and we have another 10 shots. What happens in add is that all of the exposures are added without any modifications. In this case, it didn't do us any good. While it looks kind of interesting at first, you can see that this is clearly clipping everywhere, and our raw file is kind of ruined. So what add does, it basically just adds all the gains of all the pictures you take. There are no modifications done. This can be useful if the shots that you're taking are underexposed. So let's say if you needed a 5-second shutter speed to get a pretty decent exposure, but you basically add, let's say, 5 shots each at 1 second or so, you could have all of the images added, all of their gains would be added, and then you would end up with a decent exposure. But in this case, with the settings that we had, this just blew everything out. So also very simple to understand, but when using this particular overlay mode, you have to, I suppose, understand that this is simply adding the gains and not doing any other modifications. So that sums up add overlay mode. Since lighten and darken can be very confusing, especially if you have no prior experience with Photoshop blending options, for example, let's break this down with some image examples, and then we'll look at our image examples and compare. Lighten, let's read. The camera compares the pixels in each exposure and uses only the brightest. In this cat image, the brightest parts would be the background and then the eyes. And if we combine it with the image underneath, this is what we would get. Let's look at our image example. Once again, we have 10 shots, and what would be arguably the brightest parts of the image? It would be the water up here, the waves, and then the sky up here. So now the sky is very consistent all throughout. There are not any changes really. However, in these waves, so if we look at the combined results, you can see that the overlay mode is really taking advantage of these bright parts and emphasizing them and merging them. So this is what happens with lighten. Now darken does the exact opposite. Let's read. The camera compares the pixels in each exposure and uses only the darkest. In this case, you can clearly see what are the darkest parts, the cat and then the pupils. And as you can see, this is what will be, or how it will be combined. Let's look at our images. So once again, we have the 10 exposures. Now, what would be the brightest, the darkest parts, the contrast basically to the brighter parts that we just compared in lighten? It would be the rocks, for example, here. And as you can see, the waves are brighter. And for example, in this image right here, the waves would be bright. However, this is dark. If we go to the next image right here, this is dark. As you can see, the rocks go a little deeper, and then the waves are once again the bright parts. So as we go through all of these, the darken overlay mode would analyze all of these dark parts and would take advantage of them. So it's actually sort of minimizing the waves and the water because it's focusing on the darkest parts, which are the rocks. It's definitely very interesting how all of these different overlay modes work, and they all come in handy in different lighting situations and also for different subjects. Now keep in mind that you do not have to use a tripod for this. The Nikon promotional video is actually showing some really cool examples how multiple exposure can be used. And that pretty much sums it up. Now that you know how this works, go out and take some more pictures. Thank you very much for watching. If you learned something today, liked my video, or simply got inspired, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you would like to support me and see more content like this. And that is it. I'll catch you guys soon. Take care. Bye bye.